Hey guys, Scott here with another DBD discussion video. I enjoy these. I enjoy these more than just the random gameplay uploads. It's kind of like a news format segment. Easy to make, and I really enjoy talking about this kind of stuff. So, I think I'll keep doing these. Anyway, today's topic is about boring killers. And I don't mean like player style. I don't mean like, face camping and tunneling and stuff like that. Because no matter what behavior does, there will always be players that play in a boring way. That's for every game ever made. You can't stop players from playing how they want to play. That's just not something you have control over. So this is about the actual design of the killers, the things that behavior actually has input on. And I think they should really move away from designing killers in a way that survivors find them boring. Now, before I get into it, I want to be clear that I have a pretty good theory on why certain things are viewed as boring. There are a lot of really weak arguments that people make, like, oh, you only find X killer boring because he can actually kill you, you dirty looper. You can't use your dirty infinites. Like, I think that's a shitty argument. That's not true. The thing is, survivors want to use their skill. They want to use the things that they have learned over their entire time playing in an applicable way to defend themselves and evade the killer. That is a core tenet to what keeps people playing this game. Now, when you have killers that begin to ignore that, there starts to be this feeling of, well, what the fuck does anything I have... Like, nothing I've done matters. Nothing I've learned over the thousands of hours of playing this game matters. And I think Old Legion is a perfect example of the pinnacle of that. Old Legion, for those of you who didn't know, basically, he could use his frenzy ability that he has now, except he could down people in that frenzy ability. So basically, no matter what a survivor did, they could be the worst or best survivor in the world against the worst or best killer in the world. Nothing they did mattered. They were going to go down in 30 seconds no matter what. That's assuming they didn't have Frank's mixtape, which would shorten it to 15 seconds. So every survivor was like on a timer and their skill was irrelevant. And thus, it was the worst killer they've ever made. It was the most boring shit to ever have been made. And it was unanimously agreed that he was very, very boring to go against because their skill was irrelevant. And there are a lot of killers like this. So it seems like almost half the killers in the game, survivors complain about as being a boring killer to go against. And to some extent, there is a pattern that is a bit true with that. Because if you look at the recent killers that they keep making, Spirit, Deathslinger, Pyramid Head, like, they all have this thing where they sort of ignore the survivor's skill. And I'll go into specific examples for each of those. Spirit, I've talked about a bunch. Old Legion, we've also already talked about. I've already talked about Spirit a bunch, but it basically comes down to it that none of your experience with the game really matters going against Spirit, because at the end of the day, if you don't have Iron Will and she doesn't have Strider, you are basically just making educated guesses. And that's it. You're guessing no matter what. Now, people defend it saying, well, there are things you can do. Yeah, there are things you can attempt. They're not conscious decisions to get away from the killer. You make the decision and you hope that it worked. And that's not a good feeling. But like I said, I have many Spirit videos. I don't want to talk about her anymore. Sounds are so broken anyway that she's not even great at the moment. So, Deathslinger is a recent example of a killer where your skill doesn't really matter. He's not overpowered or anything like that. It's actually fairly easy to beat a Deathslinger if you stay spread out and just, play the game as efficiently as possible. That goes for any killer in the game. But individually in a chase, he's just as bad as Spirit. He has just as little input from the survivor as Spirit does. And that is because his shot is kind of unreactable at a certain distance. At like max range, 15 meters, sure, you can react to it. But even then, he can keep doing it and zone you for free. So the thing is, nothing you've learned about the game as a survivor matters when you're going against Deathslinger. Learning terror radius and, extrapolating that to distance doesn't matter because for some reason he's got like a negative 5 meter terror radius. So he's just on your ass immediately. Looping obviously doesn't matter because he can just shoot over the majority of them. And like juking doesn't matter because you can't react to it. It's instant. And he can do it infinitely and keep doing this over and over again to zone you for free. So I always hear people say like, oh, I juke Deathslingers all the time. The thing is, you don't juke a Deathslinger. The Deathslinger misses. That's it. Because there's no reaction you're taking to him readying his gun and shooting. You're just guessing when he's going to shoot. That's the only way you're ever dodging it. And if you get lucky, you get lucky. That's great. But that is not a fun thing. It's not fun to just repeatedly go, fuck all my skill. I'm just hoping I'm lucky this time. I'm hoping he actually is shooting this time. Oh, he didn't shoot, and I juke, and now he's just holding his gun, and now I've walked backwards, or I've walked to the side to juke his shot. Now I've lost distance. Now he just M1s me. Wow, that was fun. Like, nothing about Deathslinger is fun to go against, at least in my opinion. Obviously, all this stuff is my opinion, but I feel like the majority of the people that I talk to that, have played this game for a decent amount of time find Deathslinger incredibly boring to go against. And I have to agree. I think he's just as bad as Spirit. He's so... he does not care about your skill level. None of the things you've learned matters. And there are just a lot of killers like this. Pyramid Head is like that to a lesser extent. He's kind of like he's like a Deathslinger, but at least his when he readies his ability, he can't just do this with his saw. There's a time where he has to put it in the ground, and that was cool. It shook my camera. He has to put it in the ground, and then his turning is limited, and it also lights up the ground where he's about to shoot. So it gives survivors a bit of a warning. So that's like an example of how to do like a Deathslinger thing, but in such a way that there are sufficient downsides and there are still things a survivor can do to defend themselves a little bit. So Pyramid Head is like a better example of how to make something like Deathslinger. But there's definitely this trend lately I've noticed with killers that are ignoring looping. And this is a very interesting topic because, in theory, for a killer to be any threat, they have to do something that ignores loops. Because that is the main defense that survivors have. And if you have a killer that can't ignore that, well, then they're kind of going to be a shit killer, right? Well, not really, because then you have like a killer like Hillbilly who can't really ignore loops. As long as he doesn't have like Instasaw or Crackbilly add-ons. Hillbilly is an example of, I think, of a killer that is extremely fun to go against. I love going against Hillbilly. I think Hillbilly is awesome. Base Kit Billy, again, his add-ons got nerfed, and I'm very happy they did get nerfed because his add-ons were stupid. But Base Kit Billy did not need a nerf. I think Base Kit Billy was a great example of a very fun to go against balanced killer. Because there's never really a situation when you're going against Billy where, at least for me, I never feel like, well, that wasn't fair. Maybe if he chainsaws me through a window or something, but that's the game's coding. That's not like the design of the killer. But there's never really a time where I get down by Hillbilly and go, that wasn't fair, or nothing I didn't mattered there. Usually if I get chainsawed, it's because I vault the window, he predicted it correctly, and he whips around the corner and hits me as I'm coming out of the vault. And then I go, well, fuck, I got outplayed there. And I don't feel bad about it, because I feel like I got outplayed there. Like, I made a choice, he made a choice, his choice was smarter than mine. Like, and that was, I don't even feel bad about that. That's why I think Hillbilly is a great example of, like, a fun killer. I think, like, Demogorgon is another good example, too. Like, there are fun killers to go against. Demogorgon is like Deathslinger, but he can't immediately do his thing and shoot over and over again. He can only go, like, in a straight line at all. He can't, like, flick it to the side or anything like that. So he's got to commit to it. So there's some counterplay to it, but it's also a very long-range threat. It makes Shack very unsafe. You can destroy pallets. Like, there are things that Survivor can do, and there are things that the Demogorgon can do, and they're having, like, a battle. It's an actual interaction between two sides, not, I hope he doesn't do this, or she's invisible, okay, I'm dead. It's like, you feel like as a survivor you have an option. You feel like your experience matters because you can react to something and do an action based on your experience. And I think that's what makes a killer fun. When you can't do that, the killer is very unfun. But there are gray examples too. For example, like Clown. Clown sucks ass, arguably the worst killer in the game. However, I still find him extremely boring to go against. Even though he's easy to beat, he's so boring to go against because he makes you play the exact same way. Now, at least you have some input, so he's not like as bad as Spirit or Deathslinger or Old Legion or anything like that. At least you can have an input, but the input you make is the same on every single pallet. The way you play against Clown, run to a loop, he's close enough, you just drop the pallet early. That's the only way to avoid getting hit by a Clown, because if you try to loop it, he's going to obviously throw gas at the halfway point, make you run through it, and he'll beat you to the pallet. So the only thing you can do is just drop a pallet early. Every single pallet is played the exact same way. And as long as it's like a safe pallet, like a chase ending pallet. And that's it. That's just every pallet is just played the exact same way. And yeah, I'm getting to use the fact that I know how to drop a pallet, and that's cool, so it's not the worst shit in the world. But that's an example of a killer that's not good at all, but he's so boring because you just play the exact same way. And Doctor is kind of the same way. So a lot of killers have an issue where they force you to play in a single way, and that's the only way to counter them. I don't think that's as bad of an offense as not letting you have any options whatsoever, but having one option is still kind of boring, and a lot of killers have that. That's why I think killers like, Billy, Demogorgon, Wraith, another example of a super fun killer to go against, in my opinion. He rewards survivors for being attentive, even though you can't see him. Even if he has a silent bell, you can still hear his footsteps. You can hear his, purring or that gnawing sound he makes. You can still see his shimmer. But on a lot of maps, he also gets basically a free hit on you. But then he still needs to chase you, and you still have a chase where all of your skill matters. So it rewards people for being attentive. It also rewards the Wraith for being stealthy. And again, it's just like a good mesh of things that come together in such a way that both sides are having an equal battle with each other, and that feels good. Whether or not Wraith is a strong killer, I don't really care. I love playing Wraith. I don't think Wraith is that amazing, but I fucking love playing him. I don't know. He's just fun. He's just very rewarding to play, and he's rewarding to go against. He's just a well-made killer, in my opinion. And that's, I think, the thing that the devs need to focus on as much as possible. There are a lot of things that are in the game that are made in such a way that they only really take one side into account. They don't look into the other side at all, and I think that's a huge issue. So basically, what I'm trying to say is there are a lot of killers in this game that can be perceived as boring, and I don't think it's fair to diminish survivor arguments into, well, you're just saying that because this killer is good. That's not true. Nurse is another example. If you go against a good nurse, same level of your choices don't matter as, those other ones that I talked about. A good nurse. Again, I need to make that very clear. A good nurse. Even an average or above average nurse, you still have options. A good nurse, you don't really have any options. When you run out of line of sight, a good nurse is going to blink to the line of sight and use that second blink to adjust for whatever the hell you did. If you double back, she adjusts. If you kept running, she adjusts. So, going against a good nurse, you're fucked. Like, nothing you do matters. Hey, I know nurse is OP, buddy. It's okay. But I don't think it's fair to diminish survivors' arguments into, you're just mad that this killer is good. That's why you think it's boring. I think it's just survivors want to use their skills. They just want to use what they have learned. Just like it's really, really boring for a killer to go against the survivor team that only does gens and gets the fuck out. They don't even save anybody. They just do the immediate, most efficient thing. And the killer's input on that is very, very minor or non-existent. Because the survivors don't do any altruism. They just do all the gens and leave. Guy dies on hook, you depip. That's equally as boring to go against. I'm not saying this is just a survivor-sided thing. The exact same thing happens on killer sides too. But because all survivors are the same, it's harder to make the same argument because I can talk about individual killer design as opposed to every survivor who has the same abilities. So that's why I picked this topic. But it's, obviously it goes on both ways. So when it comes down to it, I think survivors' concerns about killers being boring are usually valid. And a lot of it comes down to the fact that they just want to play in such a way that they feel good about their skill level. That's it. When you have a killer that doesn't let you do that, it's boring. And that's basically it. You can boil down the argument to just that. When you start moving into, he's just, this killer's strong, that's why you're blah, blah, blah. It starts to become like a more juvenile argument, and I don't think that's very fair. So, that's basically it. Just wanted to shed some light on the whole some killers are boring topic because it's talked about a lot. I say it sometimes when I go against like a Spirit or a Death Slayer. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a boring game. And it usually is. But that is pretty much it. I'm curious to hear what you guys think about the subject because it's definitely a very hotly debated subject. But that is it for me, guys. Take it easy. Good God, I need a haircut. Oh, this is so emo. Ugh.